Good morning, everyone. This, the Wednesday, July 1st meeting of the Nags Head Board of Commissioners is called to order. Let's go ahead and start with the moment of silence and pledge. So if you'll please join me in a few moments of silence. And now if you'll stand as you're able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we go into the introduction of the Lifeguards, I'd like to acknowledge that this is Greg Sparks' first meeting. Those of you who are watching, he is off camera. Over here to our right, Greg is our new interim town manager and has gotten off to a running start, and appreciate you being here, and welcome to your first meeting.
Thank you, Mayor and Commission.
Okay, great, thank you. The next item on our agenda is the introduction of the Lifeguards. Randy, this is going to be a little different than usual.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mayor Cahoon and distinguished commissioners. Thank you for your leadership and example on practicing and promoting the 3 Ws. Until the vaccine is available, these actions are our best opportunity to slow the spread of COVID in our community. This pandemic has been disruptive in many ways to our community, and we see this yet again today. This would be the day that we introduce to you our lifeguards and supervisors, but to maintain the social distancing and to keep in line with the extension of Governor Cooper's Safer at Home executive order, we're going to change the way we introduce our OR staff to you. We're going to introduce them next month via video. That way you can see their smiling faces and get to know them a little bit better. So I think that will help us with all being safer. Thank you.
Thank you. It is always a room full of people when the Lifeguards are here, and this seems like a very sensible approach to handling this. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda, and a motion would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The next item on our agenda are the recognitions, and Michael, we have a new employee. For the audience's benefit and for everybody else who's here, normally what happens when we introduce employees and have recognitions, they're recognized and then they come and individually greet all of the board members. We're not going to be doing that today either, unfortunately. No, so we're all going to give the wave here. Thank you.
So, good morning. I'm here to introduce Kylie Shepard. New employee, but not quite new. She's been here for over 4 months, approximately now, starting with the town on March 9th as environmental planner. And obviously, due to the pandemic, we didn't have an opportunity to introduce her officially to the board. Kylie started a week before stay-at-home orders, 2 weeks before we really started to see her less in the office, just to make arrangements to be safe in the office. She moved here for the position from Indiana. She has a degree in human biology from Indiana University. Obviously, she is responsible for the Septic Health Initiative, the Todd Crieff Septic Health Initiative. And despite the challenge of coming here and immediately being quarantined, I think she's done a great job in stepping in and has really worked well with the staff in the department and becoming familiar with everything. Kylie was last an employee with Du Bois County, Indiana, as a environmental health specialist, where she handled septic inspections for that department. Her hobbies are beekeeping, although she needed to leave her hive back in Indiana. So I'm sure she's looking for opportunities to start a new hive here. She likes water sports, which is a good thing. She acquired a paddleboard when she moved down here. And she lives with her dog, Bo, her Cocker Spaniel. So I think we're all happy to have Kylie on board and appreciate her energy and the way she looks at the program and the dedication she brings and the excitement. So thank you, Kylie.
Great. Thank you. Welcome. Nice to have you. My wife is also a beekeeper. She has 4 hives, and one of those is probably getting ready to swarm. So get a swarm box ready, and maybe you can have some bees. Sure. All right, thank you. The next new employee would be Amy.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. This is Sandra Garland. She's the newest addition to Admin Services. We're very lucky to have her. She's our payroll and benefits specialist. So she makes sure everybody gets paid accurately and on time, and she's been doing a fantastic job. She started, like Kylie, in March, right before the pandemic hit. Sandra actually lives in Nags Head and has been part of our community since 1992. She has been a great addition to the town. There's been a lot of changes, and she has risen to every challenge and every occasion that's been thrown her way, as all my staff has. I'm incredibly proud of all of them. She always wants to contribute to our department. She has a lot of accounting experience, including accounts payable, payroll, HR, general ledger. She sort of played every role in accounting at Seascape where she came from. So she brings a wide range of knowledge and talent that we can tap into, and we've been able to take advantage of that for cross-training. Sandra has a daughter, Quinn, that goes to Manual High School. She'll be graduating a year early next year in 2021. Sandra loves to take advantage of our beautiful Nags Head beaches when she is not doing payroll or working or taking care of our employees. We welcome her to our family. We're so glad to have you, Sandra. She has a great attitude, and we look forward to many years of service. Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you. The next on our agenda is Randy again.
Nags Head Fire Rescue is proud to acknowledge Engineer Anthony Dillon for his 10 years of service to the citizens and visitors of Nags Head. He holds certifications as an engineer, an emergency medical technician, a fire inspector 1, and a child seat technician. He is a busy and creative member of our department. He built and maintained our pit fire website. He works with town IT on station IT issues and has taken a special interest in Storm Truck 16, which draws a lot of attention at our stations. He has led our way, he leads the way in our department's conversion to LED lights for energy conservation. Anthony grew up in Manio, where he lives with his wife Ashley and his dad Larry. They enjoy four-wheel trail driving and beach driving. Anthony is known as the Christmas light guy in Roanoke because of the animated Christmas lights he displays on his house. This amazing light show is synced with music and entertains visitors for around 15 minutes. I had to make a special trip to Manio just to see this, and it was well worth the trip. So we are proud to have Anthony on our team. Thank you, Anthony, and thank you for your service.
Great. Thank you, Anthony. It's good to have somebody with so many skills to share in an organization. Yep.
All right. We'll continue on. Nags Head Fire Rescue is proud to acknowledge Lieutenant Mark Edwards for his 15 years of service to the citizens and visitors of Nags Head. In a commitment to the residents and visitors of Nags Head, Lieutenant Edwards has completed multiple trainings to improve his professional and personal service to our citizens. Lieutenant Edwards maintains a firefighter level 2 certification, EMT certification, North Carolina Fire Inspector, rope rescue certification, and child safety seat technician. Lieutenant Edwards has completed multiple classes at the National Fire Academy in Emmitsburg, Maryland, as well as many local training opportunities. In his free time, Lieutenant Edwards enjoys spending time with his family. Mark is married to his wife, Missy, and they have 2 daughters, Mackenzie and Abby. Mark also likes to spend time in the ocean as an avid surfer, looking for that perfect wave. Lieutenant Edwards also enjoys completing construction projects at his home in his spare time. Lieutenant Edwards, let me thank you for your passion and dedication to the town of Nags Head for 15 years. Thank you.
Anthony and Mark, we have small gifts of recognition for you. I'm going to pass them to Chief Wells, and then he can pass them on to you guys. Thank you very much for all of your years of service. It's nice also to have people build their skills and stay with us for a long time, and we really appreciate having y'all.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is a 25-year recognition. Nancy? We'll be doing a picture for this one. It's already been agreed. We're going to do a picture and masks, so.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is David Perry. He's been with the Water Department, Public Works for 25 years. He started in May of 1995. I think besides Ralph, he's the longest one in Public Works, just about. Yeah, pretty close. He holds an A surface, an A well, an A distribution, and a water license, and a physical chemical wastewater license. He's also certified to test our backflow preventers in the town. He is currently the water plant supervisor and the lab, our state certified lab supervisor. He's also very hands-on. If David can't fix it, it's not broken. He is looking forward to 5 more years of working with the town and then to retirement to enjoy the things he loves, like mission trips, fishing, hunting, and traveling.
Right.
David Perry.
Very good. Awesome. Thank you, David. Board members, if you would don your mask so we can come around here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Excuse me. Commissioner Sears, could you move to the left just a little? Thank you. Commissioner Franklin, could you move to the left a little? That'd be great. Left or right? To the left. There we go. I got it. Commissioner Franklin, and a little, just a little more to the left towards Commissioner Freeman. Just a little, are you comfortable with that? Great. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
I didn't need it.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nancy, for making that presentation. The next item on our agenda is public comment. I'll turn it over to Mr. Leidy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, the board will receive comments from members of the public. This is an opportunity for the public to comment with the board on any matters that are interesting to them. It's not an opportunity for dialogue with the board. The board rarely responds to public comment. But what we ask is that anyone who wishes to provide comment, if you'll approach the podium, start by telling us your name and where you live, and then address your comments to the board as a whole. So do we have anybody who wishes to provide public comment? No one? No? Unfortunately, it appears we have no comment today,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, so that we can close the public comment period.
Great. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is the consent agenda, which you have before you, and a motion would be in order.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The next item on our agenda is a public hearing. This will be John and Mr. Zahner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, we will begin the public hearing to consider text amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance that were submitted by a property owner to expand the principal sale items from outdoor stands to include reservations and tickets to events or activities. So we'll begin with the presentation of the staff's analysis provided by Planning and Development Director Michael Zahner.
Good morning again. As noted in the memo, this text amendment came before the board for a public hearing originally on May 6th with a recommendation and support from the planning board, but also planning staff. We had at that time recommended some alterations that were in the draft ordinance referenced in the memo that were beyond what the applicant had requested. And at that time, we understood the applicant was supportive of those recommended changes. The board at that time discussed the proposed text amendment and generally referred it back to the planning board with requests that the board consider limitations on locations, the visual impact, signage, and parking of stands. And essentially, just to recap for the public, this is a request to expand the sale items available from outdoor stands. And outdoor stands are allowed generally on a temporary basis at shopping centers and commercial group development locations in town, which there are 11 of those. And Kate Crieff, the applicant on behalf of Outlets Nags, they were interested in expanding the sale items to allow for event bookings and ticket sales for events in the region, in our area. So that was the nature of the text amendment. And as part of that, they requested to expand the allowable number of stands on a site from 1 to 2. And again, staff recommended adoption, as did the planning board, to allow for those 2 stands, but only allowing one of those stands to sell food items. When it went back to the planning board, staff recommended that the board consider options to limit the number of stands based on the size of a property, to limit the total signage to 15 square feet, regardless of the number of stands. Currently, each stand or one stand is allowed 15 square feet of signage. And to also clarify the location of stands on property in terms of whether they're allowed to be located in parking areas or not. So the planning board discussed this and ultimately recommended additional provisions, additional changes on top of those that were originally recommended that would allow for 2 stands, but only on sites that are 10 acres or in size or greater. That signage for stands be limited to 15 square feet total. So if you have 1 stand, you could have 15 square feet of signage. If you have 2 stands, each stand could have a sign, but the total square footage of the signage would be limited to 15 square feet. And that at least stands for reservations or ticket sales shall be located within the shopping center, so within common areas or walkways and not located in parking lots. Let me bring up. There we go. The ordinance, and apologize if it's any confusion on this. What I did is the highlighted portion is what staff has added in based on the planning board and staff's recommendation. If there's red strike through or underlined language. That's what the applicant originally recommended or requested, rather. So what we've done here is clarified again by amending 7.762 that sites less than 10 acres in area shall be allowed only one stand. Sites 10 acres in area and greater shall be allowed up to two, with no more than one stand selling fresh produce, hot dogs, coffee, ice cream, or Italian ice and/or fudge. And also, and this was in there previously, where stands shall not be required to be in a permanent structure and may, and we add an exception for stands for reservations or ticket sales. Currently, some stands can be on a modified trailer with certain skirting requirements. We also indicated that stands were limited in size to 150 square feet. And then the last part of this 7.76.3, where we added the exception for where stands for reservations and ticket sales can be located, requiring them to be located actually internal or as part of the shopping center versus in the parking lot. Produce and reservations or ticket sales shall be temporary and may be operated for a period of time not to exceed 180 days annually. That was in our previous recommendation. This amendment of the definition was included in our previous recommendation, and then we've now added under Part 3 here an amendment to 10.24.2.8 that clarifies or adds in the provision about the total square footage of signage. So hopefully these amendments, these changes that staff has recommended, that the planning board has recommended, are responsive to the concerns and questions that the commissioners came up at the May meeting. Kate Crieff is here to answer any questions that the board may have.
All right, are there any questions for Mr. Zeno?
Mr. Zeno, how many sites are 10 acres or larger?
One. I noted that in my staff report. I think we came up with 10 acres a little bit on the fly at the planning board meeting as a recommendation when we went back and looked at that. And I note that in the staff report, 10 acres would allow for only one of the 11 sites to have 2 stands. If you looked at 5 acres or greater, it would allow for these stands to be at 3 of the 11 sites. I believe the other 2 shops at 10.5 and the TJ Maxx Plaza.
Other questions? Mr. Fulton?
If I'm reading this correctly, there's a maximum signage allotment already.
Correct.
If we approve this, we will be allowing the maximum signage and more.
No, I don't believe so. So right now, the sign ordinance is based on the assumption that you can only have one stand per site, and that one stand is limited to 15 square feet of signage. The intent here was to, without any change, it would have allowed for that additional stand to also have 15 square feet in signage. The intent here is that the total combined square foot area of all such signs shall not exceed 15 square feet in area. So if you have two stands, each of them have a sign, then they would each, we would look at the aggregate square footage. They'd be limited to 15 square feet between the 2 total. So 7.5 square feet each.
Nope.
Anything else, Michael?
No, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Anything from the applicant on this topic?
Well, I'm
If
just
so,
here,
if you'll go to the podium so we can all hear you.
Sure. I'm happy to be here in person. Thank you for having me. I'm just here to answer any more questions, but hopefully the modifications made by the planning board will meet with your approval. We'd love to try to get somebody in before the end of the season, so, help out the local business that we might be able to find at this time.
But I'm here to answer any more questions that you might have.
Are there any questions for Ms. Crieff? Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Is this going to be in addition to the current ticket sales that you already have through your office and other businesses?
We're not selling any tickets.
Your office is no longer selling tickets?
No, we used to sell, Tanger used to sell memberships, but we don't. The outlet Nags does not.
Okay. So I realize Lost Colony isn't in effect right now, but I know that there used to be sales of Lost Colony tickets as well.
That probably was a ways back, not since I've been working there, even
Okay.
with Tanger.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions for Ms. Crieff? Anything else?
Not for me. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Would any member of the public care to comment on this proposed text amendment? This is your opportunity. Does the board wish to receive any other information about this proposed text amendment before you begin your deliberations? All right. If not, we will conclude the public hearing at this time. The board may deliberate on these proposed text amendments.
Thank you. Who has comments? Renee?
I have one more question for Michael, if that's appropriate.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Sorry, this one just occurred to me after. There's nothing to preclude ticket sales in other areas, though, is there?
No, if there's businesses that are selling, no.
Or
we
the
would-
office either?
No, correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Kevin? Any-
I just
anything?
want to start up
I didn't know if you
I will start with him.
Okay.
to thank Michael and his staff and the planning board for the work that they've put into this, obviously, when we send it back down to them. The issues that we had in our last meeting that was brought up when it was sent back to the planning board concerned the location on site, the visual impact, signage, and parking. And to me, each of those areas have been addressed by the planning board with their recommendation now, and I'm in favor of approving it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Webb?
Either I'll make a motion to deny, or if somebody makes a motion to approve, I'll vote against it. But basically, as I see it, the use is already an allowed use. So we're not asking for a change in use. That's one thing. Second, there's usually between 22 and 24 stores there, depending on walls being knocked out or put in. To the best of my knowledge, any of the stores can already do what's being asked, which is reservation and ticket sales. So that's already an opportunity that exists there. The only thing I see this doing is allowing for more building square footage, which, to me, when the mall was built, it was built to accommodate the size of the building that was there. And this just expands that. And then probably fourth, the corporate office has historically sold tickets and reservations, including dolphin tours, a number of things. So there's already a opportunity in an existing part of the mall in the corporate office that has historically done this. So the only reason I can see that we would approve this is to allow them additional square footage of some space, some building space that I just don't think is needed.
Right.
I mean, at some point in time, when?
Okay, great. Thank you. Mike?
In my point, that was great back then, and it's coverage over coverage. Most of these companies are franchise companies or corporate companies. They're not local companies. They're not going to take on a local endeavor of selling tickets to anybody. You're not adding more space. These buildings are temporary in most sites. They're not saying anything has to be permanent. It may be here this year. It may fail as a business. They might not put it back. But we regulated them to the point that they have to stay under the existing footprint of that sidewalk infrastructure. I don't see a harm in doing it. Offices, if she didn't want to run her office that way and didn't want to sell tickets because it's a one-man operation, that's fine. If she wants to put it on somebody else, that's fine. If Village Realty wants to come over and sell vacation rentals out of that spot, that's Village Realty's prerogative. I mean, I don't see why we should hold them back and regulate it on that manner.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else, Commissioner Cahoon?
I waiver some with this request, especially since everybody can already sell the tickets. I kind of understand the freestanding sign issue. It also gives the new owners an extra avenue of revenue to rent the space. But as long as it does not impede the parking lot, which was my concern at the beginning, I'm probably going to vote for this and see how it does.
Okay, great, thank you.
If it doesn't go well, then that would certainly preclude anybody else coming in and asking to expand the
Right,
use.
right, or to change the area limit to expand it to other parts of the town. So
Correct.
good opportunity to see it in one place and then see what you think. All right, in that case, a motion would be in order.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve this request as presented.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to approve. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, thank you. The next item on our,
Treasurer, was that 4 votes in favor?
yes, I believe it was. Thank you.
There was one opposed.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda are the reports and recommendations from the Planning and Development Director. Michael?
Thank you. Good morning. Again, so one thing I did want to bring up, we discovered the other day we had a slight error in our monthly report. Do you have that one of it? The revised one? Okay. All right. So I'll explain it and then I'll email it out to the board after the meeting. But so our May 2020 report, the 2018-2019 fiscal year-to-date column had not been updated. So, for instance, this number here where we're saying 492, and it looked very rosy that we were equal to the number of permits that we had this time last year. We were down by about 30, I believe, is the number. And where I had reported that we were, had essentially closed the deficit in the valuation of projects by about 1.5 million, we actually have closed it by only about 400,000. So I apologize for misrepresenting that, and we'll send that out later. So I had noted here about the valuation difference. So beyond that, there were a few items that I know the board had discussed and given us direction on, and we had gone back to the planning board for, and the first of those was the regulation of large occupancy homes, and I think this was really a discussion and consideration based on our recognition of some of the discussions that were occurring in Kill Devil Hills. And I attached the memo that Kelly Wyatt had prepared for the planning board at their last meeting. And ultimately, the board agreed that there was no further action necessary at this time, that really it was not necessarily an apples-to-apples comparison, given some of the development allowances that there are in Kill Devil Hills. We didn't necessarily feel as though we were in the same position with respect to the potential size of houses that could be constructed, some of the parking issues that they were trying to solve have at least been addressed over the years here in town. So I think the planning board agreed with staff that no further action was necessary or recommended at this time. And I'm happy to answer any more questions about that. I will reference this and then I'll come back to it because I think it probably would be a larger discussion. But residential stormwater regulations, the board may recall at their retreat in January, you'd ask the planning board or planning staff to go work with the planning board on a review of the residential stormwater regulations. And we had some delays in doing that with the pandemic, but we had some good discussions, I believe, at the last 2 board meetings, which led to a recommendation from the board, and I'll go over that with you in a minute. Going through a couple of items maybe that are more important or timely than others. 2020 census, based on the adjusted response rate, based on the percentage of estimated vacation homes, we now have a better response rate than Kill Devil Hills and Kitty Hawk, which I know Roberta is glad for, since she started a little tiff on Facebook about that. But no, I think these response rates are encouraging, and a lot of these are now being informed by the updated leave mailers that the census does, and I know they're going to be starting later in the summer, having enumerators come to locations that have not responded. So it is encouraging to see these numbers. I think they've jumped up quite a bit in the last 3 weeks or so.
Yeah. I will say now, for the benefit of anybody who watches this meeting who hasn't done it yet, it's super easy to do. And if you can't find your form, just go in and do it just Google census.gov, and you can do it by your address, and it literally takes 5 minutes. I mean, it is really easy to do.
Yeah, and I think there's innumerable ways how important it is to do for the community. So hopefully people will find some resources if they have some questions about that. I think another important item to mention is the farmers market. I think we obviously have concerns about holding it, but we are beginning our first day tomorrow, and those concerns that we have led us to be proactive in terms of taking steps for sanitation, sanitizing, making sure that people are wearing masks, making sure that we have instructions for vendors about wearing masks. And I think our request would generally be that we would hope the board would consider unfreezing funds for the part-time events coordinator position to help support that. She's done a great job. Paige has done a great job in getting everyone lined up for the market and making sure our expectations were clear with everyone.
Yes, sir. Greg? Yes, please.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioner. Sorry for a little bit of confusion on this farmer's market issue that I think certainly I started yesterday. We discussed this in our,
Yes, you can.
too hard to talk with that, in our management team meeting yesterday morning, and certainly Michael brought up, and I think a lot of our staff agreed that we should delay the farmer's market for 2 weeks. I indicated I would communicate that with the board. I ended up getting tied up in meetings all day, got something out late to you, and then by kind of late that evening, I think certainly from Michael's perspective, it was pretty late to inform vendors. So that's why we're saying we should probably go ahead at this point and still do this one and make sure we put the safety procedures. So certainly in the future, I'll make sure that I've got someone else communicating with the board if I'm tied up with other things, so that we don't end up with, I think, some of the confusion we had late last night.
Given that, then, such new news to us, what are the accommodations that are being made for the market for safety?
Sure. So we are working to comply with essentially every requirement that would apply to a retail operation under the executive order. That's signage, that's sanitation. We're communicating symptom checks for our vendors. There's a requirement, and I know this is the board's expectation, that people will be masking at the park. We've communicated, and I met last week with the chief, and we met with Deputy Chief Hale last Thursday to talk about protocols. If we encounter an issue, contacting the police department, working with customers. We are setting up sanitation stations. We actually have coolers that will fill with water, with bleach, hand washing stations that we'll have. The bathrooms at the park will be open for the duration of the market, and they'll be sanitized through the duration of the market. But I think, speaking to Greg's comment, obviously, all of this is in flux. And where we were yesterday afternoon and evening, we had farmers that had picked produce out of the field specifically for this, that were preparing for pre-orders that they had received. We had those with consumables that had baked goods. And we felt like it would be putting our vendors in an unfortunate situation at that time. But I think if the board is comfortable with staff using their discretion in the future, I think we're perfectly fine to make the call about whether or not, we should delay or reduce the frequency of the market. I think we want to make sure that we're giving the vendors enough time to have expectations. And we want to make sure that the public's safe with it as well.
Right. Is there additional spacing between
Absolutely.
vendors?
Yeah, we have, for whatever reason, we have had some vendors drop out. But in any case, we were intending to add additional space, and now we just have an ability to do that even more. So absolutely.
Okay. I know that the market at Sikatan, the one that's down near Wanchese, had also roped areas in front of the stands. Their situation is different.
Yeah.
Just to sort of keep, if you were going to a vendor, to keep you separate, sort of in a corral
Sure.
kind of arrangement. That
I think
given-
I think the biggest thing that Paige has done is to impress upon the vendors that, this is for a transaction to occur, not necessarily in years past where it's been an opportunity for socializing. Hopefully people will come, they'll find a product they wish to purchase, they'll make the transaction, and that's it, and they'll move on. So it'll be a little bit different than years past, and I think, we'll do it safely, we'll learn some things, and we've asked even the health department to come out and take a look and see if there's any advice and recommendations they would have of us as well.
Okay. Commissioner Ford had a question.
Just, I guess, one point then is following up what you said. A lot of these vendors go from place to place to place all week. And like Avon, and my question is, are the vendors following appropriate practices at these other places? I'm sure we can do what we think's right, but if the vendors are going to other places that aren't doing anything, what's our concern? And I think we should have a great concern that we monitor the vendors' activities and where they're going and making sure that they are practicing social distancing, masks in every place that they sell their wares, not just in Nags Head. I'm not against it, but I think we have prioritized trying to be safe, and to be safe, we should go the full 9 yards, not just stop and say, well, we're doing the right thing. We need to find out if they're doing the right thing.
Right.
No, I would say, one, I can't tell you right now, unless Kelly may know, how much overlap there is between our vendors in our market in Avon. My instinct is that it's not 50%, that there are fewer rather than more. But that would be a guess at this point. But I would tell you that, again, the value of Paige is how thorough she is and how much she does to set expectations for the vendors and vet them. And I think, and also understand what's happening at other markets. And I think Paige, my sense is that the vendors that are participating in these markets are being more thorough and safe maybe than some of the customers have been. And our expectation is that they would continue to do that here. So no, I don't think that there's an issue with any of the vendors. I think the vendors are taking steps to be proactive, limiting people into their areas, setting up their areas differently so that people can't necessarily walk into their areas. You know, they know that there's no tasting or sampling of consumable items. I think they're doing the right thing.
Well, I mean, fortunately, I'm glad it was not a planned observation, I think, at the meeting when we said that I believe Renee brought it up about wearing masks at town, events on town facilities. And so I'm glad that we had already addressed that, because now we don't have to sort of spring that on people, and that they're already aware that there is a mask wearing requirement for everybody at the park.
Yeah, I think even leading 2 weeks up to that meeting that you had discussed it, we had been exchanging emails about what our directions were going to be to the vendors. And, were they going to be required to wear masks? Yes. What was our expectation for guests and customers, which I think would have been strongly encouraged at that time. But now with the order from Dare County and the state, we have a lot more to go on there. So.
Will there be signage about the masking at the park tomorrow?
Yes, again, under the executive order, retail operations are required to install signage about social distancing and masking. So we've taken the signage that the state uses, has issued, as well as Dare County, and we've laminated those, and they'll be on display. We've made one for every vendor.
Okay.
So I think we're taking every precaution we can.
Okay. Kevin?
Yes, sir, I'm good.
Renee?
Thank you. Given the reality of what I've seen before and after the executive order, how many staff people will be out on site?
3. Well, 2 today, but if you unfreeze the funds, it would be 3.
Plus, how about police?
We've coordinated with the police that they'll make it a stop on their rounds. They wouldn't be there permanently, but they would be available if we needed assistance, and would stop by periodically.
Okay.
I've seen great reluctance on the part of, embarrassingly so, local people to wear masks in businesses. They don't feel like they should, as well as an inordinate number of visitors that don't think they should. So I think we're going to have some issues out there, and I hope that we're prepared to address them. Because
Yeah.
how they're addressed and how we react determines whether we go forward or not.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm excited about it, but I think that's my principal responsibility. So tomorrow.
Wear your muscle shirt.
Appropriate.
An appropriate, excuse me, a town-appropriate muscle shirt.
I may need to get an airbrush one. So,
Michael?
Yeah, thanks for your efforts, Michael.
thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm glad we're going to get sort of a proof of concept to see that we can do this. And that should be a message to the vendors as well, that if it doesn't go well, I mean, it's,
Yeah,
Mayor, just a quick, do you
Yes,
know
sir.
how many vendors you have scheduled for
I
tomorrow?
believe 43. 40.
And and the spacing is all around the park?
So normally, we are confined to the area nearest the stage. Generally, I would say the half near, but we're going to allow everyone enough breathing room.
yeah.
And we're going to make sure that we tape off the playground equipment again during the market, so that, one, we don't have to worry about enforcing that. No one should be on it regardless,
Right.
but we want to make it doubly clear that they shouldn't be on it.
Yeah.
Mayor?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
I'm expanding the discussion, but I feel like I must. I walk by the park area usually about twice a day, and consistently, the playground is always full, and there's no mask being used at all. So I'm very concerned with the farmer's market. I want to see it happen. But if we're not patrolling the playground right now, I mean, people are even moving the fencing, if you will. And they don't even have to move it. All they got to do is walk around it, but they're actually moving it. And they're on the swings, they're on every piece. One day I went out there, every piece of equipment was encumbered by adults and children. There's no mask, there's no social distancing. I guess my point is, if we're not enforcing that, are we gonna enforce this? And my desire would be to make sure that there's a police presence.
So obviously, the town manager's office is here, and that would be their responsibility. I can only tell you that we will take responsibility for enforcing with the assistance of the police department of the market. And hopefully, maybe facilities can look into signage, ongoing signage for the park, for the playground.
I thought we had signage out there already.
There
I
was.
believe there
We've got
is.
signage and the playground is blocked off.
But-
I understand, but obviously that doesn't keep people
Well,
out.
the only way we're gonna keep people out of the playground is razor wire. I mean, that's, short of that, they're gonna go in that playground. I mean, I've observed it too. I mean, they're just,
I see it at Whalebone. I don't even know if there's signage at Whalebone, but there's people out there all the time.
yeah. Yeah.
Just if you're
Yes.
looking at 40 vendors
Uh-huh.
with 2 staff,
Yeah.
I-
Yeah.
I'm, y'all gonna be busy bees is the only thing I can say, because I don't see how 2 people can do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't see how 3 can do it, because I can tell you, it's a nightmare even in a close proximity, but if you're strung out, there's no way you're gonna get people to wear masks throughout that vendor area. When they refuse to wear them anywhere else that they go.
Well, it's gonna be an interesting experience. I'll be there if you call on me. I don't think I have any appointments in the morning, so I can throw myself in there if it becomes necessary.
But I would suggest that police be out there the entire time. And I mean, I would like for some support, not to direct anything in terms of operation, but as a value of the board. I mean, we have a very strong policy on trying to protect people.
Yep.
And I think we should make sure all of our actions go behind that policy.
Right, okay. This goes beyond Michael, but I see the manager nodding his head. Can we make arrangements to have an officer there tomorrow for the duration?
Yeah, I'll get with the chief on that to make sure we have a stronger police presence to address some of the playground issues and mask wearing issues.
Well, and I think just generally, given just to be a backstop to staff, and given that how difficult this is to deal with, as our merchants have seen, to give them a little oomph.
I agree, and I know everybody wants the money on Unfrozen, but I want to have more secure feelings about how it's going to proceed than just tomorrow. I mean, I'm willing to do it tomorrow, but I'm not willing to unfreeze it indefinitely until we see how it's going to go, because it may not be that we have a second market.
Yeah, we'll
Based
evaluate
on
how
tomorrow.
it works and report back, so.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Because I'm not sure we're going to have enough staff to do this every single week.
All right.
If our
Well-
staff has a lot of other things on their plate.
Yeah, I would suggest, because if it doesn't, there is the possibility, if this does not go well, that, we're not doing this anymore as a town for the summer, which would be a shame if that happened. What I would suggest then is, let's have an immediate sort of post-action report from staff after tomorrow.
Sure.
And then have the town manager report back to the board members, and then see if we can tackle this staff item.
Okay. Yeah, are we unfreezing any position for at least, I would say, so my comments are, concerns are, one, we definitely need the position for tomorrow. Regardless of whether or not this is the one and only, that position would need to coordinate with the vendors to close things down, issue refunds, what have you.
Okay.
If, even regardless of whether or not the funds are frozen, that position, the nature of it is, if there is nothing for that person to work on, if there is no market to be coordinating, then that person is not working hours. If there's no events to be planned, we're not being billed hours for that position. It's not as though the expectation is that they're in the office for half of a week and are only able to do work, are getting paid regardless of whether there's work or not. That's not necessarily the case with this position. And I think we use it and have demonstrated that we are judicious in the time and hours that we assign to those part-time positions.
Okay. Can we unfreeze this for 30 days, for the next 30 days until we get to our next board meeting for them to
We use a
pay as
discretionary-
needed?
Discretionary fund from the town manager to pay that.
I would approve that, but I expect to see a lot of reporting, because I'm concerned about how many people we have here and what the influx of giving them something extra to do will be. Because everybody's looking for things to do, given the number of things that are not open. I think we're going to have more of a problem than anybody understands.
Okay. In that case, would that require a motion to that effect?
It would.
Okay. Then I would do that. I would move, as I indicated, that we unfreeze the funds for this position for a 30-day period to get us to our next meeting and have staff expend that at their discretion as they normally do.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Reluctantly.
Opposed? That was a reluctant aye.
Reluctantly.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Michael.
Yes, sir. Thank you all. Just a couple more things to run through. Grants, and we were unfortunately not selected for further consideration for our DCM CAMA access grant for Huron Street, which we knew that our application didn't necessarily check all of the boxes from an ADA accessibility standpoint. We felt we came up with a strong project or plan for that hopefully is something we can see in the future. But it looks like Jacob Street, which also was subject to a grant, is close to finished. And we'll start to look at permitting for Islington as well. So, and we have, I've referenced a grant application for the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. We've submitted the final application for that as well. And Holly White did a great job working with Kate Jones to pull that application together. I think there were close to 10 letters of support from a variety of entities, including, just so the board is aware, we did receive a letter of support from Congressman Murphy as part of that, and I believe Senator Tillis was going to also submit a letter of support for that application. So we're really appreciative of the hard work on that. So back to the stormwater regulations. I'm not sure how much the board wants to dive into discussing the recommendations, but essentially what the planning board and staff recommended were focusing on the improving of the education and availability of resource items. And there obviously are a lot of options under those. And then also looking to enhance existing ordinance incentives for preferred outcomes. A lot of the education and available resource items don't require really any action per se, other than knowing that the board is supportive of some of these things. We are actually doing some of these in terms of looking to better improve the educational opportunities related to stormwater and water quality in conjunction with septic health. You'll see some of that when we talk about the decentralized wastewater plan update. But Kylie and Kate, with Roberta's help, and I believe Benny, filmed a video that will come out soon, approximately 5-minute long video on stormwater and septic health and water quality, and it's really well done, and I think you'll be impressed by it. Soon we'll be sending out a mailer like we do most every year for septic health, but we needed to do a mailer for our CRS program, and so we also added a mailer related to stormwater and water quality. So those will be going out shortly. think there are some opportunities. We are looking, Huron Street, we tried to plug in a lid stormwater project as part of that. And so we'll look for other opportunities to see about grant-supported projects for lid, low-impact development techniques where they can be a pilot project that we can use them as an educational tool in the community at a highly visible location. And when we're talking about financial resources, these may be something that require some action, some grant funding, some consideration in future years' budgets. But, you know, we hear about concerns about the cost of stormwater control measure installation. You know, we do give credits for septic inspections. Could we look at something similar for stormwater control measures? Some way to reduce the cost, some way to encourage people that are not doing a construction project that would otherwise trigger the residential stormwater from looking to install a rain barrel or something like that. And again, pursue grant funding to provide funds to homeowners for the installation of stormwater control measures. We talked about even point 2, this is on page 6 of 7 of my memo, establishing a water bill credit for installation of SCMs. Kate had sourced at one point barrels that could be converted into rain barrels that we could provide at a cost less than you could find necessarily on the private market, and whether that would be something that people in the community would be interested in. Incentive-wise, we want to look at ways we can expand available credits to reduce built-upon area. We want to find ways that we can maybe lessen the number of projects that are subject to the stormwater regulations in terms of providing a stormwater plan because they've done something that has exempted them from it. I think I may have told the board, or I know I told the planning board, we had a project, I believe it was a pool project, where they triggered the review because they had over 500 square feet of built-upon area. But they had preserved trees such that they were able to get a reduction of that built-upon area to less than 500 square feet. But because the original project was over, they had to submit a stormwater plan, even though, because of the credit, they wouldn't have normally been able to, or been required to do so. So something like that would require some tweak to the ordinance, and I think it's something that we should do. There's also currently a cap on the reduction of built-upon area. So you could preserve trees, you could preserve open space, you can do other things, but you can only get to a point of preserving or reducing your built-upon area credit by 30%. So we talked about just eliminating that cap, creating some other incentives, currently reducing the number. Well, right now, to get a credit, you need to provide 3 stormwater control measures. Maybe that's only 2, or maybe, again, we broaden what those allowances are. One of the difficult areas is kind of decoupling the credits from kind of the engineering methodology. So right now, for instance, if we were to say that a preservation of a tree or preservation of open space was a stormwater control measure, it would have to be assigned some type of volume that would meet the calculation of volume for the built-upon area. And so we could work within that framework, or we could think about throwing out the calculation methodology entirely, which may get at also some of the concern that we talk about here is creating a more consistent expectation for the sizing of stormwater control measures, where, for instance, a drip line infiltration trench is not needing to be a certain width or depth because it needs to meet a calculation, but we say it has to at least be, 6 inches, has to at least be, 8 inches in width or something of that nature. And that satisfies the ordinance. In doing that, it may be easier to convert to a more points-based system. And we had talked about this originally. We thought it might be more complicated than it needs to be, but I don't think it's complicated. I think it's probably an easier way to do it. And another concern was we didn't want to necessarily recommend something that was a wholesale change of the way the ordinance works, because we didn't feel like it was appropriate to then have to educate people again on how it works. But doing it in the way that Kate is here, if the board has any questions about how the current ordinance functions or some of the thoughts that she has, any anecdotes she can share about her dealings with applicants. But I think this idea in this draft form is something we can expand on. So generally, the educational side of it we can move forward with without much direction unless the board is, against, strongly opposed to something that we're suggesting that we do. Obviously, the financial items we know are going to be tied to our budget or grants, and that's something we'll be proactive about looking into. These other items, some of them we could deal with in the regulations and bring those back to you, which we need to do in the midterm anyway. But the larger scale ones would require an ordinance change, which would need to go back to the planning board and then come back to you.
So, if I'm following that all
Yes, sir.
correctly, if there was something like a tiering system where there were a set of check boxes that essentially would say you complied automatically and kick you out of the system, and then the next sort of tier is X number of measures, and you can count them. You know, if you're doing engineering, 1, 2, 3, you've got 3 on site, you're also done. And that the final is, no, this is a bad site, a difficult site, nothing else here seems to be working, and you're going to end up with some kind of engineered solution as either the third or fourth tier, whatever that is. I mean, that is appealing to me. It sounds like some other systems I'm familiar with where you can get kicked out, for not, you sort of check 3 boxes and you meet those requirements, you're out. So, but it seems like this would all be appropriate once you've gotten just a little further into this for another workshop with the board to go through this, because it's not something we can really do in this setting, and it doesn't sound like you're quite ready. I mean, it sounds like you've got things that you're moving toward, so it would seem to me that perhaps sometime in the late summer, early fall, it would be appropriate for us to have I don't know about the timing, but that would be appropriate for us to have a workshop and see this. Does that seem right to the board? Okay. All right.
Good. We'll continue to refine it. Yeah, and come back to the board.
Okay, thank you.
So I think that's everything, unless there were any questions about anything else that were in the report. That's everything I have.
Okay, that's from your update. While you're at the podium, do we want to go ahead to item H3?
Sure. We can do that. With the camping.
Yes.
Sure. So, let me bring up my memo in the ordinance. So this is something, as I indicated in the memo, working with Ed Snyder, the code enforcement officer, as he's getting into his season, as he's plugging in, the typical letters that he's sending for enforcement actions into our permitting system. He's making sure his code references are correct. And he recognized that our former provision that he would cite people under with respect to camping in RVs had been moved into the UDO, where and I'll read that, it's not in your package, bear with me 1 second. So formerly under the mobile home chapter of the town code, which has been moved essentially into the UDO, there was a provision that said, it's long, was formerly 24-4, but essentially said you can park a trailer on any premises outside of a trailer park on which there is located on the same premises a hotel, motel, or dwelling house with the permission of the owner of such premises or the leasee or tenant thereof for an indefinite period, provided, however, that no living quarters are maintained or any business conducted therein, and that no person inhabits the same while such trailer is so parked or temporarily stored. So that's been covered in the UDO. It's essentially the use of a trailer in town is a prohibited use. You can still park it, but you can't use it. What we weren't aware of, it seems, is that we had a provision 26.7 of the code that addressed camping, and essentially, as it reads, and it's a little, admittedly, it's a little confusing. I had some questions. Andy and Greg reviewed it, and they both came to me with the same question, I think because it kind of creates a little logic confusion for people, because the definition of open-air camping included camping in an automobile or vehicle which does not meet the requirements of a mobile home as defined. So that did include campers and pop-up campers and RVs and the like. So that use of a camper was allowed under this section as open-air camping, or defined as that. And then the provisions went on to say that technically it's disallowed. You cannot open-air camp in town except that the owner or leasee of improved property, real property in his immediate family, can do that, as long as they have bathroom facilities available to them. So we saw this and we read this and believed it to be in conflict with the prohibition that was formerly in the town code and now in the UDO on the use of RVs, and felt like this was something we should bring to the board. I believe this is something you could act on and maybe should act on, and if there are questions on, maybe we can revisit it. But we wanted to clarify that, that camping using a vehicle, including but not limited to a personal vehicle, mobile home, and travel trailer or RV, that those cannot be used for open-air camping within town.
So the enforcement issue is that people have campers in their yards.
Correct.
And they're letting people live in them, essentially.
No, usually the enforcement issue that we see are people that have rented a house, vacationers, and, you know, someone also comes and brings an RV or a camper and resides in it or for that week. We do, I think less so, it's complaints about a permanent resident where that's occurring on someone's property, but that, I would say, 1 or 2 a year versus, you know, in the teens, I would say, of the other occurrence where it's a renter short-term during the summer.
Huh, interesting. Okay. Go ahead, Will.
I'm going to say I am confused, so I need to ask just specific
Sure.
questions. Can a family member drive an RV, park in another family member's yard, and sleep in the RV?
So the issue is that there has been and there is a disconnect in the ordinance where one section of the ordinance would preclude that, and this section would appear to allow for that. And that's at least existed since 1990.
I agree. I mean, but my question is, does this allow for a family member to drive an RV and park in another relative's yard? And if so, well, and I'll expand, and if so, for how long?
Yeah, what I've drafted here would not allow for that.
It would not allow.
Correct.
Okay, so then my next question doesn't make any difference, which is, could a family member park in the right-of-way of the property and connect up? And so the answer obviously is no.
No, and that would be precluded by another section of the ordinance with respect to parking. There's a provision about parking of certain vehicles in the right-of-way, so that would be prohibited by that.
So the purpose of this would be to remove all ambiguity about whether you can stay in an RV anywhere in the town, under any circumstances.
That's correct, and it could possibly be another option where perhaps there was a duration allowance or an occupancy allowance. If we're talking about owner-occupied property, maybe there are different allowances for those, because I think this provision was intended to allow for someone with their kids to camp in their backyard. Should they also be able to camp in their RV every once in a while? Perhaps.
Well, or should the adult children be able to take up residence in the RV that's in the driveway?
Right, and that may be where maybe there needs to be some time limit on camping. Maybe it's no more than 2 consecutive nights, or maybe it's for, a limit on the number of nights during a year or something like that. You could go down the rabbit hole very quickly on this.
I think Michael's right. I think, if I remember correctly, we were trying to allow family members to have a tent in the backyard so the kids could go out there and spend the night, but not allow just open air camping. And it was also to allow, and I thought for a certain period of time, a family member to park a vehicle on the property, connect up, and stay for a certain length of time. But obviously, that doesn't exist anymore. I'm all for not allowing just open air camping and not having RVs just park where people are staying in it.
As
I'm
am
all
I.
for that.
And I was thinking about this a little bit last night, and I also wondered if, where it says owner or leasee, if, and this may be for John Leidy to comment on, whether or not the meaning of the term leasee has expanded in our use of it, and that maybe it was originally intended to mean someone that held a rental lease for a property versus someone renting a property through a broker for short term.
Right.
That's a lease arrangement.
Yeah, I know.
I think that would apply to even short-term rental,
Right.
the way it's currently.
I agree, yeah.
What you are seeing are big houses, bringing RVs, and people living, they've met the occupancy of the house. So
And
they-
there's
they're
oh
packed,
my God.
they're not just packed in the house, they're packing them in the campers too. Because everybody wants to come,
Yeah.
because it costs, that way they split the cost of the
Plus, the
house.
rental companies are cracking down on that, but,
They're not around it. The neighbors are around it.
yeah, right. Right. So, Kevin?
If you're cleaning up the ordinance so that there's no confusion, I'm all for that.
Okay.
And I know that we will use discretion if there's some kids camping out in someone,
Yeah.
their parents' backyard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I don't see that as a problem.
Okay.
And I think that's, you're not gonna get complaints about that overall.
Right.
What you are gonna get complaints about are the uses of hooking up and different things when there's already 20 people in the house and they've got another
Right.
multitude in the camper. Because some of them are pretty large.
Right. Okay. Mike?
No, I'm for cleaning up the ordinance.
Okay, same here. So, what we need to do then, can we move this today?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In that case, a motion to approve this ordinance amendment would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinances pertaining to camping. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Thank you.
Are we gonna come back and address the term of leasee at some point? Because that didn't address the big houses.
No.
We can mull it over a little more and bring it back to you
Yeah.
for some other options.
Yeah, I had no inkling that that was an issue, so.
Well, if you
yeah.
park a big camper on any of these properties with big houses, then you become a parking issue.
Yeah,
Which
sure.
at some point, the town is going to be involved in, the rental company is going to be involved in, that problem will correct itself.
Yeah, yeah, good point. Okay, thank you. Michael, let me ask you this, because I was trying to get us through H and then get Eddie up here, since he's here. And Can you give me any indication how long H4 might take?
H4 would only take as long as Kylie can introduce it, and if the board has any additions, comments, concerns about the scope.
I know we have to circle back, so I'll ask the board, is the board amenable to finishing H, and then we'll take a short break, and then we'll take Eddie for a discussion about the path? Okay, all right, let's finish H then, Michael.
Sure. You want Holly to come up first for the hazard mitigation?
Sure, that's fine.
Morning, Mayor
Morning.
and Board. Happy to present the Outer Banks Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan to you this morning. The board is aware from updates from the town manager and the planning director over the last 16 or 17 months that the town has been participating in this project with Dare and Currituck counties as well as the other Dare County towns to update the hazard mitigation plan. This is known as the Outer Banks Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan. It's an update to the 2014 Albemarle Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan. Staff feels that this plan is a little stronger. The scale of this regional plan involves fewer entities. It's allowed the town's needs in regard to hazard mitigation to be better represented, as well as our vulnerability to hazards. This is a necessary plan that we have to do that's updated every 5 years that allows us to have access to post-disaster funding, but it is also just a good practice that allows us to develop proactive mitigation measures. The town staff did take part in a planning team of representatives from each of the communities as well as citizen representatives. And from Nags Head, we had Deputy Fire Chief Shane Height, Planning Director Michael Zahner, myself, and then Megan Lambert and Mead Gwynn. The Planning Board did approve this at their, recommend approval, at the June 16th meeting, and staff has included the resolution of adoption for your consideration at this time. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you.
Any questions, Holly? And you've seen the resolution. I'm not going to read this resolution today, but you've seen that. The essential whereas is that it's our intent to fulfill its obligation under the North Carolina General Statutes 166A, North Carolina Emergency Management Act, and Section 322, Mitigation Planning of the Robert T. Stafford Relief and Emergency Assistance Act, to remain eligible to receive state and federal assistance in the event of a declared disaster affecting the town of Nags Head, among others. So a motion to adopt the resolution would be in order.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we adopt the Outer Banks Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan as presented.
Okay. Thank you.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. All right. Michael, last item would be the decentralized wastewater management plan. Morning again, Kylie.
Good morning, everyone. So I am bringing this draft scope for the decentralized wastewater management plan to you for your review and input so that we may proceed with the project knowing that it meets the goals and expectations of the board. So this is an update to the 2005 decentralized wastewater management plan. We are updating this in accordance to the technical report indicated in the 2005 plan that stated there was a need for additional review and consideration of the impacts of stormwater on water quality, particularly in the surface water ditches. So we are wanting to integrate this plan and we are also looking at, hold on just a second, sorry. So we are wanting to develop and release an RFQ, retain a consultant, and adopt this new updated plan. and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions, board members? I'll start with Michael.
You say retain a consultant,
Yes.
and is that for what benefit?
So we have in the scope, we have outlined objectives that we are wanting the consultant to look at, which is everything from summarizing an evaluation of the current plan's performance and finding ways to improve our methods and practices moving forward. Also, developing ways to include stakeholders in this process, as well as creating a holistic and integrated public outreach program.
What's your thoughts on the plan?
I think it's a great plan. I think this is something that we could have definitely utilized in Indiana when I was doing septic there, and I think it's a great way to get homeowners involved, looking at the different water quality issues that we may have in protecting this community and keeping it vital.
Thank you.
Renee?
I noticed that one of the things that was asked for in here was a liaison as well as a steering committee.
Mhm.
When do those things are proposed to take effect?
So we discussed that. I believe that was something, correct me if I'm wrong, that was a part of the first plan, a steering committee. And so that is something that we have looked into. I'm not sure of anything further. Michael, do you?
Yeah, I think it would be good to know, we recommend, let me go up there. So I think what we indicate is the board may wish to assign one or more members to serve as a liaison. I think that would be a good idea so that the board member can serve as a conduit for information back to the board and to the steering committee about expectations. And that individual could serve on the steering committee. And as Kylie indicated, there was a steering committee for the original plan, broadly represented, and we would also recommend the same here to make sure that, that they helped with the focus of the plan, focus of the consultant, but also could bring broad input into what the plan was intending to address.
May I?
Yes.
Because I was going to bring it up, but you brought it up, but I would argue vehemently against a board member serving as a liaison. I think that was a trap we fell into years ago. And I think what tends to happen is whoever the liaison from the board in becomes the de facto leader of whatever the group is that's happening. And I prefer staff doing staff work and having board members do board member work. And I don't want a board member sitting on a committee trying to tell staff what to do. I think it just doesn't serve a useful purpose to me.
Okay. Thank you. You're not asking for appointment today, though, without regard. One of the requests of the consultant is that they identify and map groundwater levels. Do we have adequate existing wells for them to be able to do that, or would this involve new test sites in town?
I believe we have adequate wells to do that, along with the testing wells that we already use for our water quality program.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, board? Thank you. Is this something, Michael, that y'all are asking us to approve the scope?
I think if the consensus of the board is that they support the scope, I think that's perfectly fine. I don't think you necessarily need to take a motion on it.
Okay.
I think the feedback you've given us, at least in your questions about potential liaison, I think are good and informative.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I believe that finishes H. Anything else for Kylie before she leaves the podium? Great, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
guys.
The board will take about a 10-minute recess, and we will return to hear and have discussion with Eddie about the progress on the multi-use paths. Okay, the board has returned to session. Before we go to item I, new business, Andy or Greg, do y'all one of y'all want to speak to how Eddie came to be here this morning and what this topic of discussion?
Well, good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. So everybody's well aware of the multi-use path project that continues on. We've been working on this since late winter, early spring. We started in the further north portion of town from Soundside Road to Danube, and now we're working on two final phases, 8C, which runs from Danube down to Sea Chase in front of the Outer Banks Mall, and 8B, which runs from Bay Meadow to Gulf Street in front of the Tanger, or former Tanger outlets, outlets of Nags Head. We continue to try to provide information to the public and to the board about the progress of these projects. We've been working with the contractor to do that. We've been trying to provide the best information we can. In recent weeks, we've had some delays on the projects, which has resulted in additional changes to the information we're giving. We met with the contractor yesterday. We've had staff meeting with the contractor on a regular basis since the project began, but especially over the last month and a half. We met with them again yesterday to talk about this issue because we really need to pin down how this project is going to proceed and how we're going to be able to get information out to the public. When we had this meeting yesterday, we were informed of a fairly substantial change in the schedule, particularly for 8B, which is further south, which concerned us, and so we brought that to the attention of the board, and we asked the representative from RPC to be here to talk to the board about that and answer any questions for the board and have a discussion. So we asked Eddie Valdivieso to be here. He's the engineer for the project, and
Okay.
that's what we have.
Okay. Board, anything else from Eddie, from Andy before we hear from Eddie? Okay. All right. Thanks. Thank you, Eddie. Appreciate you coming in today. Help us
Good
out
morning.
with this. Good morning, sir.
Mayor, Commissioners, Eddie Valdivieso with RPC Contracting. Thank you for the opportunity to come talk to you.
Sure.
I'm here to answer any of your questions.
Yeah.
I guess I could start out this way, probably to not to get too much ahead of you, but the
Right.
8C project is, as we met with town, Andy and Mr. Sparks yesterday. On top of that, Dave Ryan and I are pretty well in communications pretty much on a daily basis, either meeting out in the field or talking on the status of issues that we're coming across or have come across in the field. Real brief summary, 8C, currently the final completion date on that is July the 16th, and we're projecting the 20th to be the final completion on that. Just by way of example, I mean, as late as this morning, we've come across a small item that's may set us back a half day, with some traffic signal issues that we've come across again. But that phase or that project, pretty much see the light at the end of the tunnel on that.
Can you
Go ahead.
characterize some of you mentioned traffic signal issues. Can you characterize some of the things that you've come across in the field that have sort of the hidden conditions and unexpected conditions that have hindered progress?
Yes. I guess the overall opinion, it seems to be, not you folks, of course, but is a sidewalk project is fairly straightforward. You come out, grade, put concrete down. But there's a lot of dynamics involved in that, particularly on the design side, which the town's done a great job on the design plans, but there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle to put together out in the field, and doing that under traffic conditions is another item that, you know, we all have to take into account. We've come across utilities, for example, that were thought to be not in conflict with work that we're called to do, and they are in conflict. So when that's discovered, we stop, and issues or resolution is identified, and then it's fixed. But that takes time. And those are just items that we've come across.
Are those utilities, are they power, water, telephone?
All the above.
DOT?
And water. Yes, sir.
And don't forget culverts.
And culverts.
Okay.
And are those issues that you're coming in contact with, are they common on projects like this?
Yes, sir, they are. It's 6 to 1, half dozen the other. You spend the money up front and pothole the whole project every 200 feet, take shots on top of these utilities, and you have a set of plans that's got everything located fairly precisely. Or, you know, if you pothole 200 feet apart, halfway in between, that utility line could do something like this. And just that change in elevation we'll find. You know, with a big piece of equipment, we'll find it pretty quick. So generally, design locates are done, which is the normal process that the utilities come out, mark their properties, that's surveyed and it's shown on the plans. So we know in general, you know, where most of the utilities are. It's utilities that either were not shown or were unknown. And their locates, they're only as accurate within this much on either side of where they mark it. It's just that those subtle changes, particularly with how deep they are. Because if it rises up into the areas where we're working, putting in a new culvert or shaping for a new ditch or a swale area, and all of a sudden we come across a utility that may have been shown on the plan, but it's higher than was anticipated, then we've got to stop and have that addressed.
Okay. Sorry, before I interrupted you, you may have been going further, but are we just at questions at this point?
I'm ready for some questions.
Okay. Mike?
Do you feel the project from start or expectations that were set real? Do you feel that the schedule that was set by RPC was met with the right expectations? Where do you feel all that from day one to today is, from your side of it?
Well, that's a good question. We've got 2 phases under construction. 8C, I feel we're maybe a week late at the most, considering where we're at now and the atmosphere we're working in, and the items that we discovered in the field and what we've worked through. It's fairly within the contract time for all practical purposes. 8B, conversely, and that's the reveal, I guess, that we extrapolated a completion date yesterday, has been impacted. So to answer your question precisely, no, not on 8B. There's a set period of time to get the job done. When we come across issues, if it's justified, we get extra time for that to cover those items. But the reality is the slowing down on 8C with some items that we had to address is a domino effect onto the next phase, which pushed out some time there.
So you think it goes back to what you stated a minute ago, was the planning stage moving forward kind of sets you up for a slower pace towards the end?
I don't know quite that. I'd say actual construction on one phase and the issues that we've come across really on both phases has delayed the second phase because we're concentrating on working our way out of 8C.
Thank you.
There were more conflicts in one of these phases than the others?
Yes, I'd say 8C so far has the most conflicts. And there are subtle design changes that, happen out in the field. Once something's laid out, you can see perhaps something could change. And, this day here, day there, it adds up over time.
Renee?
Eddie, I noticed in the latest completion schedule, we're talking about mid-August for 8C. Or is that 8B?
That's 8B.
8B, sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
We're talking about mid-August. How do you anticipate that going with the amount of traffic that's going to be here, since it is our busiest season of July and August?
Not being sarcastic, but I think it can't be any worse than it is right now. And in all sincerity, seeing the light closure here on 8C, DOT is correcting some loops, traffic loop issues on 8C that apparently cause the lights to go on a timer versus being signaled. I think will improve traffic. Not to everybody's satisfaction, but it'll increase the flow on 8C. Once we're out of 8C and on to 8B, it's further down the road, in my opinion, a little bit away from the congested commercial areas. Yesterday I witnessed DOT subcontractor was there in front of Tanger Outlet Mall fixing a traffic loop, and they had both lanes blocked. Both southbound lanes were closed, and they're diverting traffic to the middle of the road. And it wasn't that bad. I actually called, it was just after our meeting with Dave and Andy, and I called him to say, just follow up on what we were all discussing, that it could be not as bad once 8C is done and 8B, and we're working down there. But I let him know about that 2-lane, southbound lane closure, diverting traffic to the middle of the highway, and really not much. I mean, it might have been a 5-second delay on some of this traffic. Granted, it was a beautiful day. People were on the beach generally. It wasn't one of our classic cloudy, rainy days. It'll be a different story, I'm sure. I'm confident that the 8B phase, traffic will be a lot more manageable. Tolerable might be a better word for it.
Thank you.
Kevin?
Just out of curiosity, I think y'all are throwing a lot of resources at this to try to get it done as soon as possible. How many workers do you have on site between the two projects right now? And once the one up here finishes, will those personnel, those people go down to the other site?
We've got 6 crews on the site, and the majority of them are grade crews, and they're split between the jobs. Now, we've done a lot of work on 8B. There's stuff going back to what I was originally talking about, how most folks don't see progress until concrete is done. But there's pipe work and stormwater pipe work that's installed first. There's a lot of fill that was brought in on the job, 8B I'm talking about. And so our grade crews are prepping now. They've been prepping the area for our concrete crew to come in and start forming and pouring concrete on 8B. So yes, when 8C is completed, the rest of the groups will be going down there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Will?
Just one question. I mean, as all of us have been in traffic and you get to the post office and you go, oh crap, I should have got on the beach road at Doom Street. That being aside, both to you, RPC, and to the town, how many complaints, particularly from the business community, have we received about the traffic problem?
If I may, there's a meeting here specifically for the business owners to chime in, if you will, a Zoom meeting. And there was 3 or 4 businesses that did have some concerns, particularly on 8B, about when we had a lane closure up, how our barrels were set up kind of hid their entrance. or made it that much, they thought it made it a little tougher for potential users to find their driveway. And we basically widened up the throat where we set barrels at. And we haven't heard anything since then. We've cleaned up some areas. There was concern about where we were parking our machines at night. You know, it's off the right of way, but it's in front of their businesses, and it detracted from appeal of business and blocked some of their driveways, to be frank. But we've moved all that out of the way, and I'm not aware of anything else.
Yeah, I mean, the board knew that we met with businesses. We hadn't really heard of any complaints from the mall across the street, the Outer Banks Mall. There's not many more businesses on this 8C phase. You've got the hospital and you've got the mall. So we focused on businesses down at 8B. We were able to meet with them and resolve most of their concerns. I think we did send an update to the board about that. I think they were satisfied with that. They were excited to see the project proceed. They were excited about the prospect of having the sidewalk. So we're hopeful that we did address their concerns. We've received a handful of complaints, mostly from frustrated drivers. I've received a couple. David may have received a couple, but I would say that it could be worse for sure. I kind of agree with Eddie when you look at the different phases. 8C is definitely worse from a traffic perspective. You've got 4 traffic lights within probably a mile, and you've got people trying to merge in those areas. Further south, you just get into that wide open stretch in front of the village, and you've just got the traffic light at, I believe it's Sea Chase, which is still pretty far south, far north of the project, and then you go all the way to Gulf Street. So I feel like there are going to be a lot more opportunities to merge and continue a pace down there than you do up here. So that's what I know.
All right. Board? Great. Thank you. Eddie, appreciate you coming in
Yes, sir.
today. We'll just continue to update the public as we go along. And, it is short-term pain for long-term gain. I know it's painful, but I also know that folks are going to be very happy with this project once it's all finished.
Our guys in the field are pretty numb to traveling public. It's justifiable, but they want to get out of there too.
I don't know if anybody else heard this. There were some guys in beach chairs sitting out there one day. Honk and will drink, basically, and everybody was honking and they were drinking. So,
Well, when I was coming back, Nags its finest was chatting with them.
very good.
The safety factor alone.
Thank you
is
very
gonna
much.
make a huge difference.
Thank you, Eddie.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is new business, and that would be committee reports. I'll start down here. Does anybody have anything to report? Michael? Renee? No? What's happening at the pier?
I have not gotten any updates from Mike Rimage on that. I did see, I was at the Comfort Inn South for all last week taking a class, and on break I would go out there and I would see people out on the pier.
Right.
But I haven't received any information.
Okay, all right, thank you. Webb? Okay, great, thank you. The next item, Mr. Leidy, would be items from the town attorney.
I have nothing to present at this time.
Okay, all right, thank you. Greg, the next item would be items from the town manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, first, particularly after hearing the nice introductions for our new employees, I thought I better add a few things to some of my comments. First, I'd just, again, like to thank the Mayor and the Board of Commissioners for the appointment as your interim town manager. I've certainly been made to feel very welcome here by both the board, staff, and employees that I've had a chance to work with now for almost 2 weeks. Trying to get up to speed on a number of issues, and we certainly have some critical things that are coming up from a management standpoint. We're going to have a hiring decision on Public Works Director with Ralph's retirement September 30th. Want to get moving on that recruitment process and for Public Works Director. The mayor and I visited on Friday about the town manager recruitment process. I've reached out to really kind of look at 5 firms that specialize in public sector executive recruitment, and I've asked them to submit a proposal to the mayor by July 10th. And so then we can try to keep this on kind of a schedule then for the board to select one of those firms. Either you may decide you want to interview a firm either by Zoom or in person. I think that's still to be determined. I think those were just a couple of key things of I wanted to make sure it was communicated. I think the other thing too, though, just from the introduction standpoint, certainly as the board knows, and I think the community knows, I recently retired as city manager from Eureka, California. On the West Coast, happy to be here on the East Coast. It's much closer to 2 granddaughters in Durham than California was, so that was a primary motivation for my wife and I to move to North Carolina. And as I was hearing some of the personal things of people's hobbies, you may not know about myself, is that I'm a backpacker, mountain climber, and been doing that most of my adult life, so I'm looking forward to climbing all the highest peaks in Dare County. Hopefully by the end of the summer I will have accomplished all of that. But no, it's great to be here, and I certainly want to be a valuable resource to the board and the staff. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda would be the Board of Commissioners agenda, and I'll call on Commissioner Brinkley. He specifically asked for one item.
Yes, just to try to get an update on recycling. I think you have the information that you're going to present.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Brinkley. Back in June, the board discussed recycling and asked us to look at several different things. One of the items was to look at the potential to add in a subscription service for the town residents. We had reached out at the time, the former town manager, Cliff Ogburn, had reached out to Bay Disposal and some other companies to see what the interest would be in having a subscription service that residents and property owners could sign up for. What they told us, the only interested firm was Bay Disposal at that time that would be willing to consider the service, but they needed a certain number of applicants or subscribers before they would initiate the service. So they asked us to look at putting together a list or asking people to sign up to the list. We have done that. Roberta put together a form on the town's website and solicited information through all our social media channels. And so far, we've had 129 people be placed on that list to potentially subscribe to the program. So that's where we are at this point in time. She continues to reach out and ask people for their interest in that, and we'll continue to update the board on those numbers as we get those. The second item that the board asked us to look at was a committee to look at ways the town could consider reducing items from the waste stream, sort of meet some of our recycling and waste reduction goals, and consider some other progressive ideas that the town could consider to meet its goals for this particular topic area. Again, Roberta put out a call for folks interested in signing up for that. We've had 25 individuals express interest in being on that committee. So one of the things that staff is suggesting is perhaps in August, the board could vet that list and consider who would be placed on the committee. We could also present the board with a charge for that committee, sort of draft that up and have a discussion about that, what the primary focus would be, and then sort of lay out a schedule for that committee and some goals and objectives for the committee. Our thought would be that, after the season would be the right time to start those discussions with the committee, and certainly after this summer season, consider what our future options for these types of services would be. So again, we have quite a few people interested, so no problem there getting interested parties, and we'll try to get information to the board on information about those candidates and have that discussion.
Were they asked basically to provide the same information that potential applicants to board and committee positions were asked? So we know
Correct.
where they live and.
General
Okay.
background information.
When we get to that point, I would offer that giving that, whether we would call it a committee or a task force, I would argue for task force because it is a time, limited time on one item sort of charge. But writing a good charge, an accurate charge for what exactly we want them to do and what set of things we want them to look at and make recommendations on would be critical. So I would look forward to seeing that.
And I appreciate the information. August would be great to try to start working on a committee. And then the last thing, I know that there's no money included in the budget, but we still have some citizens that think that we're going to be having recycling in the off-season with town forces. And if that's not the case, I suggest that we get ahead of that now, that the postponement also carries over to town forces and just not the amount of money that we were paying Bay,
Right.
Understood.
in my opinion.
There's still some work to do. We are obviously offering recycling centers at Town Hall here, and we've had one added at Public Works. We had a dumpster at Public Works. We've added a full-blown recycling center like we have here. It's there now, so people can go to those locations. It's all commingled, but Bay Disposal is still picking that up, and so that's an additional task, is to work with Bay Disposal to see what the options are for actually recycling that material.
Right.
It's still being incinerated at this point. And so, that's probably one of the things the committee could look at as well, is, we need to care about what happens to this material once it's collected.
Right.
And I think that's probably the criticism of the program that we had previously, is that, it leaves here. And for most communities, it's been the same way. It leaves here and you really don't know what happens to it. It ends up overseas in China, and then from there, you really have no idea what happens to it. And so I think that one of the things we wanted to talk about in this charge for the committee is, what's actually being done, what is the value of it, the true value? And so,
Yeah.
Again, I appreciate the information, and I use the facility at Public Works, and I found them to be very clean and easily able to dispose of the recyclables in there. So thank you to you and the staff, Public Works, that keep those areas clean.
okay, great, thank
Good.
you.
Other board members with questions or observations about recycling? Okay, all right, great, thank you. The only thing I would have on my agenda is one of the things, and I don't have dates to offer, I'm sorry, maybe we'll do that at the next meeting. I talked to the interim town manager a little bit about a fall retreat. He is still getting his arms around things, has a couple of important hires to make, has some evaluation of, what the status of the town and the projects, and we have other things going on. It seemed appropriate after he had been able to sort of get through that and we'd been able to get past the season, that for the board to sit down and set some objectives going into the winter, and to perhaps develop what would be a set of issues that we could then be talking to the permanent town manager about when they get on board, so that they're up and running and ready to go, with us having sort of restated our goals and our priorities. So if the board is amenable to that, we could talk about a date sometime in the autumn here to have that discussion with the interim.
As long as we're talking about a full-time town manager and not permanent.
Full-time, not permanent. Did I say permanent just now? Did I? Excuse me. Full-time.
Sorry.
Well, it's the opposite of interim, so it should be hopefully long-term, if
That's
not
fine.
permanent.
That's
As long as it's not permanent. Okay, understood. Thank you. Any other business to come before us, Renee?
May I make a observation or comment? Ever since the governor's order about mandating masks has come out, we've done a really good job getting people down to the area. The beach is as full as I've ever seen in my life. I've turned down probably 150 calls wanting something this weekend, to the point where I've had to put my phone on an answering machine and not answer the calls. But what I'm not seeing front and center is advice given to the traveling public of what the expectations are when you come to North Carolina. And that responsibility to me belongs to the Visitors Bureau. To get that out, I've seen no communiques to the rental industries, of which I am one, coming from them, you know, saying we're going to be proactive in this. I've gone to the website a couple times, and at the very bottom of the page, you see a travel advisory and tells you to click to read more. But I think the Visitors Bureau needs to be doing a much better proactive job, front and center, advising people, we welcome you to our area, we want you to come to our area, but we want you to be healthy and safe conscious. And that is to wear a mask and outline those parameters. They need to be doing it up center, because all you get is things to do, history, different things, but there's nothing in there, in any of these things that say, please be safe and wear your mask. When you're coming to visit our area, wear your mask. We're getting more and more cases all the time. A lot of them are local. They're community spread throughout big events. But I do know a lot of businesses are closing because of employees may have had it, but those employees may have exposed our visitors to the COVID as well. So we need to be responsible on our end about how we address the mask issue and public safety issue. And I think the Visitors Bureau needs to be, if they're our voice to get people here, they also need to be our voice about public safety. And they really need, this is for you, Commissioner Fuller.
I'm almost ready to respond.
They need to be front and center, our advocate for public health.
Well, one of the, in an earlier part of our discussion about how does the average tourist know where to call about an issue, well, they have the biggest platform by far. So, Commissioner Fuller, did you have a response to that?
First of all, I agree with Commissioner Cahoon, so let it be said. But then, to be prepared for this, what I have is that the Tourist Bureau right now is running a campaign through the summer that includes radio buys on East Carolina radio stations, all of them, and on jam media stations, all of them. So there is a commercial that talks about it and talks about masks, et cetera. Secondly, the campaign's based around the state's 3 Ws, and it features the county COVID webpage, and that appears in Outer Banks Today, Outer Banks Voice, and Island Free Press. Next, the Visitor Bureau has purchased printed ads in the summer editions of North Beach Sun, Outer Banks Coastal Life, and the Milepost magazine, obviously bringing people in, but also talking about safe procedures. And then the Bureau's created a tourism pledge webpage displayed on outerbanks.com for the benefit of visitors and locals that highlight business safety protocols. And last but not least, the Tourist Bureau has produced masks that are branded and for the Tourist Bureau only. And they're handed out and distributed free through all the welcome centers. So that's the response of where they are and what we're doing. I believe that some board members think we could do more. Other board members think we're doing enough. And it's the Tourist Bureau is maybe a little bit different than us in that they accept their primary mission as getting people here. I think we have a little bit broader perspective. We want you to come, but we want you to come and act responsibly and be safer. And it's trying to get that message, I think, to the Tourist Bureau that both of those are equal. And we need to, I think we can do more. And so I agree with you, but I just wanted to let you know that there is some action, but I agree with you, it's not the highlight of what they're doing.
And I think that's great. All of those things are focused for when you get here. perhaps on our website as we advertise to get people here, just put a little stronger message that's visible, not all the way down at the page where you have to click to go to another icon about the masking. Because we need people to be prepared when they come here, not try to find masks and different things after they get here. And we need to do a better job of asking our businesses in town to put up the mask sign and enforce it. There's a lot of businesses that are not enforcing it, and I don't understand it, but I've seen the results firsthand at one of my neighbors having to close their business because they weren't paying attention to any masking, and now they're closed.
Well, having to close is the ultimate penalty for not paying attention. I believe the way the enforcement in the governor's order was set up is that it could be against businesses that were not enforcing it.
That is correct.
And so those need to be known and reported, but again, we go back to the issue of, well, what does the average person know about, reporting a concern that they see. Thank you, Renee. Michael, anything else before the board? Kevin? Well, all right, great. Hearing no other business to come before the board, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Motion.
Motion and a second? Sure. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you.